Let's
Okay,
get
cool.
started.
Sorry.
Wayne, so I just learned, you just mentioned that this is your first ever podcast, so I will treat you very nicely.
Mm.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. This is amazing. I'm going to be honest with you. I've been working in the business for um, 11 years now, 12 years, and shift is sort of an enigma. And so I'm excited to talk to you about shift, about the work that you guys are doing. Tons and tons of respect for the things that you guys are doing, and so I'm excited to hear more about it. Like selfishly, very curious. And so I guess just to get started, you want to just tell me where this podcast finds you today?
Yeah, I'm here at the office. There's a backdrop of the office behind me for those who are eventually maybe watching. But yeah, I'm in the office. I'm based in Bath in the UK, and yeah, I guess it's morning here. The office might fill up, but yeah, at the moment it's quite quiet.
Yeah, it's today's Liberation Day in Italy, and got the family at home. Got the dog barking here. Hopefully, it doesn't come through. So, but yeah, no, cool. This is going to be amazing. Maybe just to get started, you want to tell me a little bit about your background. You are the CEO of Shift Active Media, and maybe just tell me a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, a little bit about yourself.
Yep, sure. I guess it depends how far you want to go back. I grew up not far from here, so actually in Bristol. I kind of grew up. I was a it sounds like a hard luck story, but I was an only child of a single mum who brought me up, actually. And but you know, it was a fantastic upbringing. My mum did everything that she possibly could for me, and so I didn't want really for anything. I may have wanted a motorbike or a pony, but I was able to get a few great bikes on the way, supported by my grandparents. As they bought me my first BMX and then my first mountain bike, so there was a kind of early connection with bikes there. But yeah, I guess like my early ambitions at that time, I think I wanted just to kind of get a smart job, and I thought about being a estate agent, a realtor. I guess was kind of like the view I had at that time. But I was also in my youth, I was a child actor, and so
Wow,
yeah.
really?
No, it was I had a career, so to speak, in kind of on TV and did a bit of stage work and was part of a ongoing drama group, and so I sort of bring that story up because it actually led me to work in advertising. Because as I was in my school, I had to do work experience, and because I'd already had experience of being an actor, and that was what I was hoping to do at that time. My teacher kindly said, "Well, you need to do some work experience anyway. Maybe you should think about advertising. It's a little bit like acting." I couldn't make the connection myself. I subsequently kind of post-rationalized it to think that actually the work that you do as an actor is seen by other people, and the work that you do in advertising is often seen by other people. So, to that extent, you're putting yourself out there. But I spent like 3 days working in an agency in Bristol, and it coincided with reading some bad news about kind of how difficult the acting profession was. And so at that point, I switched from thinking about being an actor to thinking about working in advertising, and changed my A levels, and actually decided to study at A level, which I guess after high school was business studies, communication studies, where I actually had another person in the class was a certain Simon Ware, the founder of Shift and GCN. So we'll come back to him at a later date. So that's how we met. And then, I guess after my time in my A levels, I wanted to do a degree that was based on kind of had a marketing component to it, because I was still enthusiastic about working in the advertising and marketing space. And after a period of looking, I went to university at Birmingham. So that's a pretty prestigious university in the UK, and I studied commerce, which to a 16-year-old sounded super cool. Actually, in later life, I realized that kind of business administration or an MBA would sound a lot better, but I thought commerce sounded brilliant. It was actually a mix of industrial economics and business. Studied a lot of marketing as part of that, also strategic management. And then, like most people leaving university, this was back in, I think, 1994. I was looking for a job. There's a thing in the UK called the Milk Round where you apply for various graduate roles, and didn't get one in advertising, but was offered a job in the post room of an advertising agency. So that's how I started delivering at that time, which might be for your younger listeners hard to believe, but there was no email, so we were handing out memos.
Yeah.
There were passing those around, which kind of makes me feel ancient. But
no,
yeah,
I'm with. We're about the same age, and so can you give us some reference on the acting that you did? Like, if you can give us an idea. Was it local acting? Was it national?
No, not at all. I was. It was. I started off on a famous BBC show called Casualty. So I'd done my fair share of like stage shows and school productions, but it was picked up and was in a one episode. So it wasn't like I was in a series, but of Casualty, which was filmed in the local area. But that was like a stepping stone, and then I did a bunch of work after that with chat shows and in films and in local in children's TV. Probably like 5, 10, 15 appearances on TV between the ages of 13 and 16. And then actually I was offered another, which was useful because it got some extra money. So it was quite nice to go to my bank balance, and there was some money from acting was there. And then I got offered a second part in Casualty, and I decided that I didn't like the role and I didn't really want to do it. And I thought, actually, you know what? I think my kind of my passion for acting had probably kind of like passed me by at that point. So yeah, that
you said something about it not like being a very difficult trade, which I've heard, and I've never worked in acting or anything, but I've heard that it can be incredibly difficult. And so that was more of like a reasoned...
Yeah, I was a member of Equity, which is like the actors union in the UK, as a junior member. And there was an article that came out, I think, in the publication by them, which said that something like 64% of actors were earning less than £10,000 a year. And so I was like, well, that sounds like that's going to be quite a challenging environment if almost 2/3 were kind of, below like the threshold of what I thought would be, a salary that you need to live on. And so, and actually there was a limited options at that point. I often look back kind of a little bit regretfully, because at that time, probably around about 92, there was an explosion of channels. There was this kind of whole TV landscape changed. There was a lot more opportunities for actors, and because I'd had that experience, I might have been able to make a career in it. But I think acting, like any job, is you need to be passionate about it. And if I didn't really feel the same level of passion that I had for it when I was growing up. So yeah, it felt like the right decision for me to switch.
That's an interesting way, because you do have to have like a fuel. It's with a little bit of hindsight, we're both kind of at a certain level of our career now, and you do have to have some talent. I always tell my kids this: you have to have 3 things. You have to have talent, you have to be good at it. Someone has to pay you for it. There has to be need for it, a real need for it. And the third one is, there has to be a need for it, that someone has to pay you for it, and you have to be good at it. Yeah. Right. So to have those things, and if you're missing one of those, you probably should look for something else, because it's just not going to work. And, so you saw commerce, which, was something that sounded like you wanted to be part of, because you said you had done advertising, you had done business. So around like economics and business, that was something that was interesting to you?
Yeah, I think I knew that advertising was a kind of strange blend of creativity and business. You were being creative for the sake of helping businesses to grow. And so I thought that was a good way to blend the sort of creativity that I had got through acting. This is looking back now, hindsight's 2020, right? But I think that there was an element of recognizing that you could be in business, but you could still do something that was creative. And you were often on set working with actors to create commercials. You were working with people with really strong craft skills to fashion advertising. I worked in traditional advertising is where I kind of started my career, and that was advertising at the time. The stuff that we see now is the sort of the way in which it has become much more, many more channels, lots more opportunities to connect with consumers. Back when I started, there was posters, TV, radio, not much more. Magazines, not much more than that. And TV was kind of like the focus, and outdoor advertising probably came a little bit second, and no one really wanted to do much on radio.
So you got into the advertising business. You said started kind of just wherever you could, but you had your sights set on this industry.
Yeah, it's a well-trodden path within advertising, actually, that they had these dispatch departments. So the agency where I started had about 400 people. Which huge. For a UK agency was huge, and it was owned by WPP, and they had a traditional graduate scheme, but they also took on people to work in a dispatch department as a stepping stone to getting a kind of proper job in advertising, quote unquote proper job. And for me, I was very fortunate because I started on this journey thinking, okay, I don't know how long I'm going to be in the post room. Refer back to my earlier conversation about £10,000. I was on £8,000 living in London, which is not easy.
Impossible.
Even in 1994, that was not easy. And within 2 weeks, I was asked, or in the second week, I was asked, could I spare a couple of hours to work in support of a pitch team that was putting together a presentation that they were flying off to Munich the next day to deliver. And I said, yeah, sure. I had no plans that evening. I was earning £8,000. What plans would I have? And I started at 6 and I got home at 10 a.m. the next day. So at 6 p.m. in the evening, we worked through the night getting this pitch presentation ready. And then we handed it over to them in the morning at 9 a.m. And then I went home at 10 a.m. to go to sleep. So huge. It was fun, working through the night, exciting. You knew that you were in support of something that was a major deal for the agency.
You knew it was an opportunity.
Yeah, and I knew it was an opportunity to me personally. Very fortunately, that was a Tuesday. By the Friday, we were confirmed as winning that pitch. And then I was, running up and down the stairs, helping them, get the faxes sent over to the client to confirm the win. And with that, came an opportunity for me to step up from the post room to the graduate scheme. So, actually, I only officially worked in the post room for 2 weeks.
Wow!
But it kept strong. Yeah, it was a classic sort of. Michael J. Fox style story. Yeah. So I was. Yeah, it was an extremely exciting time. It was extremely proud to get that opportunity. Worked with some amazing people at the beginning there. Great sponsors of me.
What was
at
the
the
pitch?
time.
What was the company?
So yeah, like most of the brands that not most, but some of the brands I worked on, it doesn't no longer exist. It was Compaq Computers, who were the world number one at that point. They displaced
PCs, yeah.
IBM, and they were huge. And we were working on the European business. And they were previously with Ogilvy and Mather. Ogilvy and Mather had dropped them for IBM, and so there was an opportunity for somebody else to pick up Compaq, and that's what we did. And I worked on that account for, I think, the first couple of years of my time in advertising.
This is high-flying advertising. I mean, we're talking about big-time advertising in the UK and in the Europe, right?
Yeah. This was. I mean, so the agency was probably in the top 10. The campaigns that we were responsible for were running across 25 markets.
Wow.
And yeah, it was kind of high profile stuff.
But these agencies, they've changed. Like, this type of business has changed incredibly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my last agency that I worked at was kind of similar, but the complexity and the diversity of the output had changed dramatically. But still, like, there was a huge focus, and actually that was one of the reasons I changed my career in later life. There was a big focus on blockbuster TV advertising, and kind of Super Bowl style spots was the kind of pinnacle. And the agency that I worked at that time was doing a lot of work like that. So it was high profile. Heinz, Land Rover, were the kind of two of the flagship accounts that we had at that time.
So you worked, started out. So fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So sorry. Humble start. I start there. Advertising was pretty good to me. It's quite you're driven to progress and to go up through the ranks, and so you start as an account exec, and then you're an account manager.
Right.
I switched then to a more creative agency called Low Howard Spink in the UK again, working on Smirnoff, exciting global vodka brand.
Yeah. Diageo.
Diageo. Diageo didn't exist at that point. Diageo came into existence about 12, 18 months after I started. And then rose up there to an associate board director. Meant you got a company car, which was great. And then I moved to another agency called TBWA, still exists, a big global agency. There I went to work on Apple. So that was a big, obviously amazing brand. Good time for the business. It had just come out of the kind of Steve had been then in place for probably like 4 or 5 years. We had the Apple Mac. I was involved in the launch of the iMac. I was involved in the launch of the iPod 2, which is the one that's actually more famous. And David Beckham was seen wearing an iPod, which made the sales go crazy. I launched the iTunes Music Store in Europe as well. Now no longer in existence, but was a pretty big deal at the time.
What are you doing in cycling, man? I'm starting to understand. Okay. Why are you here?
Okay, well, I'll fast forward to my last job. I switched over from traditional advertising to digital advertising. Also worked with Google there, and I worked with Mini, and I worked with Sprite, and then kind of went to work at a big mainstream agency, 550 people, as I said, called Grey. Exciting. It was a really amazing time. I was responsible for their digital and their innovative advertising, using kind of lots of different channels. I wasn't really necessarily involved that heavily in the TV side.
Right, because advertising changed over the course of, you saw it all. Like, you went from the analog to digital.
Yeah, first chapter of my career was very much analog, TV, posters, print. Second chapter with a little slice in the middle where I went to become a client for a while. So experienced it on the other side from the agencies.
For as a global marketing manager.
Yeah, I was a UK marketing manager for a hair care brand. I learned so much in that. I was there for 18 months. It wasn't really for me, but I did learn a huge amount in that time. And then I went into digital advertising when it was kind of really nascent. So it's just at the beginning of becoming a thing. Banners, websites, where there was no social media at this time. And I started there in 2006. It was my first management role as well. So I was client service director there. Really was able to fuse my early experience from traditional advertising, which was kind of, I would say, much more professional and serious than digital advertising was at that time. It was very kind of bootstrapping and kind of
the budgets were lower.
So the budgets were lower, etc. Exactly. And then with my client side, I was able to bring my knowledge of kind of forecasting and business, and also kind of really understanding clients' needs, and fuse those together and kind of help that digital agency evolve and grow into a kind of more serious entity. So that was my time there.
Was it kind of a startup?
It wasn't a startup. It was definitely it was more of a scale up. They'd been acquired by a big media agency group, but they recognized that they needed to kind of professionalize and grow up in terms of the maturity of the business and how they engage with clients. And we had massive brands working with us. We were working with Sky. We were working with T-Mobile. We were working with Virgin. It had some really exciting brands. But digital was then seen as kind of like quite secondary to the primacy of TV advertising
Sure.
and the media agency. And so
The margins were lower, probably.
and I just think it was just kind of like, because you were often experimenting and trying to deliver new things, stuff could be easily made, some stuff could be very difficult to make. And so getting that balance right was quite a challenge. Anyway, so sorry, then I took those skills that I acquired in the digital agency, moved to back to a traditional agency, but ran their digital offering. Had a fantastic time there. Rose up to be chief operating officer of Grey, which was obviously a big agency, and had a great reputation. I'd enjoyed my time, but I was getting to that point where you're thinking, okay, like, what's next for me? And there's a sort of those corporate pyramids. They're not always the most fulfilling, and I wanted perhaps to take a little bit more control of my own destiny. And so started to look around and thought, you know what, at this time, my family was, I had a young family, but they were going into kind of secondary school. And I was thinking, do I want them to grow up in London, or maybe I might want them to grow up outside of London? Didn't necessarily be one of those people who wanted to commute back into London. So I thought, you know what, it'd be great if I could go back to where I was, originally grew up, and maybe get a job there, or set up a business. And so that brought me all the way around to speaking to an old friend of mine, Simon Ware, who had recently taken some investment from Eurosport to grow his business, which was Shift and Play Sports Network, which incorporated GCN. It was all part of Play Sports Group. And was thinking just to pick his brains and think about maybe setting up an agency, and maybe I could use his network and his resources. And he said, well, you could do that, or you could come and work here. And so I was like, okay, yeah, actually content, backed by Google, was growing at a rapid rate, had a really interesting take on community. Oh, there's this kind of agency part as well. I know about agencies. And so kind of like it was really appealing. And so despite having this background of working with all these big brands, actually, the world was shifting, content and community was coming to the fore. And what Simon was doing was really kind of exciting and genuinely entrepreneurial as well. And I was like, okay, that sounds exciting. He's like, okay, you're going to have to, cut your salary. I can't afford to pay you what you've been getting paid up there in kind of London in advertising, but I can offer you an opportunity to be part of this and grow it. And we're going on a journey. And so, even though, as you said, how did you leave all that behind to come into cycling? Well, I kind of left it behind to come into something that I thought was genuinely exciting and different.
Sure, a startup,
time.
and to have...
I was a scale up. We were 50 people. We were, this was it was a robust business with a reasonable turnover and strong performance. But it was like we were going places. We were rolling out globally and introducing new languages, etc.
Yeah, and this was, I see, so it was around 2017.
Yeah.
And just to kind of fill in the gaps, so no, this is super clear. So you did have like a lot of experience in big agency. Which would it be safe to say that London is sort of the epicenter of European advertising?
Yeah, I think of European advertising, London probably leads the way. Obviously, they vie with New York for global advertising.
Sure.
I think something like 70% of advertising dollars are spent through New York. But yeah, a large chunk is also going through the UK. So yeah, it felt like, and I was part of a big global network. We were often back and forth to New York. That was the headquarters of Grey, my final agency. So yeah, it was very big. I think Grey had 9,000 employees globally, so it's a really big network. But it was established business. It was well over 150 years old.
And you had seen kind of everything you were going to see.
Yeah, I think that you just get to a point in your career where you want to try something different. I was very keen to step outside of that corporate world and try something that was much more entrepreneurial, where people
and you were
had skin in the
around
game.
40, 43, 44 years old, something like that, maybe a little bit younger.
So let me just think. I was 44, I think. Yeah.
And that's like between what I've seen is between like 35 and 45 is when either you make that big change or not. Like there's that window there. And so you had this
Well, actually, for clarity, and I know I think you mentioned this on the previous podcast with Will. So Simon started Shift. Simon's, he should be his own story, so I won't try to do full justice to that. But he was working at Future, had a hugely successful career in publishing. But he got to the similar point, maybe a little bit earlier than me, where he's like, okay, do I want to continue on this kind of corporate ladder, or actually, do I want to try something different? And can I try something? If I'm going to do something different, it needs to be able to combine something that I'm super passionate about with kind of expertise that I have, to our earlier point in the conversation. So he thought, well, I'm super passionate about cycling. I understand the world of publishing and media. And at that time, the media landscape was going through a kind of changes. They'd probably started, mid 2005, but by the time you get to 2010, cycling was probably lagging a little bit behind what had kind of happened in maybe more mainstream industries. But there was a kind of big impact of digital. Then there's the big impact of the kind of global platforms, Facebook, Google, etc. And I think our traditional cycling clients were asking themselves, how do I navigate this kind of new landscape? And Simon thought, actually, there's an opportunity for a business in there, because things have changed from sponsoring a team and maybe putting a full page ad in Cycling Weekly to now having to think about, how do I, interact with this community on multiple channels? And so that was the sort of genesis, if you like, of Shift. 3 people, all previously worked at Future together, led by Simon, who kind of, put his whole kind of savings into starting that business with not a clear understanding where it was going to go, but just felt that there could be a business in there. And then he started that back in 2010. By 2012, the business was doing okay as Shift, and an opportunity came up for him to pitch to Google the chance to set up a content business that was going to work on YouTube, and that's how GCN was born. And actually, Shift was part and parcel of helping to design and create GCN in those early days. In fact, Cy Richardson, who's probably one of the most kind of famous presenters, along with Dan Lloyd on GCN, worked for Shift back in the early days as a marketing assistant.
So and maybe not a lot of people don't know the connection, but GCN and Shift were kind of came from the same.
Yeah, so they were actually 2 separate companies. But when the Discovery first invested in 2017, that was rolled up into one company, and then I joined the combined company was known as PlaySports Group.
PlaySports. Okay, so PlaySports was, is it still?
PlaySports Group, and then there was Shift, and then there was PlaySports Network, and that was the home of the channels.
GCN. The 2 subsidiaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, we are 2 separate businesses, but that's sort of, you have to sort of fast forward into the future to tell that side of the story. But in 2019, there was further investment from Discovery. We all became part of Discovery, which was again an exciting time. Be part of this big broadcasting leader. And, that was kind of an interesting bit for me. And I was working both across Shift during that time, predominantly like 80%, but I was also involved in the channel business and working on the kind of development of a subscription product. And so that was kind of an exciting time as well. But then if you fast forward to 2021, at that point, we had the opportunity to buy Shift back from Discovery, kind of strategically that made sense for us, a 35 person marketing services company specializing in cycling being part of a big global 11,000 person broadcasting company focused on rights and cable television. Like those don't necessarily align, and so we had the opportunity to take it out of the group. The channel business stayed within Discovery at that point, but Shift became independent, and at that point I became CEO of the independent Shift.
In 2017?
No, 2021.
21, okay. And that was your first role as a CEO?
Yeah, that was my first role.
And that's when, the pressure's on then, right? I mean, because you've got the responsibility for the P&L and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably worthwhile just going back. I mean, yes, so, but I had that within a bigger group in from the moment I joined in 2017. I was responsible for the Shift P&L, and I was actually responsible for the Shift proposition, and so that was a really exciting part of my time with in this role, was arriving and finding this amazingly talented group of people who were working in an agency specializing in cycling. The bit that I've neglected to say, that at that point I wasn't a cyclist. I'd had passion for cycling in my youth, but certainly wasn't a cyclist in any way, shape or form in 2017. So I said to Simon, you do know I'm not a cyclist, right? And he's like, yeah, but you know about agencies, we know about cycling, it will all kind of work itself out. So entered a completely new category, completely new landscape, without that innate knowledge of the product. And that was challenging. That was, it was the first time where in a traditional agency environment, you've got 6 to 8 weeks to learn about a new car brand or banking.
Cycling's complex.
But cycling, everyone really knew it. And I was working with people who were not only worked in it for a long time, either on the publishing side or in the case of Will, who'd worked in the distribution side, but they were also passionate riders in their own right, so they kind of did it in their spare time. And so to enter that world and then be working with really prestigious brands on a global basis and not really having the riders' names and the pro peloton at your fingertips, it can be a little bit daunting. But I kind of used my naivety to my advantage, and then was able to kind of ask questions that he probably had a year to be able to sort of say, hey, I don't quite understand, can you explain that to me, how that works? And I also kind of used research, which actually became a big part of what Shift was all about, but was an opportunity that we had to do things differently, to have some intelligence about the client or the brands that we're working with that maybe they didn't even have, because we're able to research it using the techniques that we've developed with working closely with GCN at the time.
Yeah, you guys do an annual report.
We do a whole range of research, but at this point it was kind of a bit more ad hoc. But now we've got our own research platform, which I could come on to talk about if when we get to that point in the conversation, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess now we get into the kind of the agency piece, which I've worked. As you know, I've worked in cycling, as I mentioned, but Shift is, I'll give people some kind of context, at least from an insider outsider.
Yeah.
Shift is the premier agency in cycling. It's like you guys are the 500-pound gorilla agency in cycling.
Well, I guess it's all relative, isn't it? We were talking about the size of agencies earlier.
Yeah.
The agencies I'll tell you a little story. I remember when I first joined Shift. So the first thing I had to do actually was, and it was almost before I joined, was we were pitching for Zwift. We were repitching. They'd just taken on some investment. They were thinking actually they'd probably outgrown their time with Shift. They'd worked with since beta in 2015. And I was like speaking to Simon, and I was like, do you know who we're up against? And he's like, yeah, we're up against Mindshare, I think. Now, Mindshare was a company that it was in my previous group, WPP, probably 10,000 people. And so I was like, well, I think they probably got more people on reception than we have in our media team, right?
No, I know.
So we were relatively small, but we went into that pitch with a kind of huge amount of knowledge and insight, and was able to tap into kind of like the expertise, do some unique research, and then we were able to win and retain Zwift. So I guess that kind of, I think that I tell that story to say it's kind of all relative. Yes,
it's
within
absolutely
cycling,
relative, but you guys, from the standpoint of agency in cycling, niche It's a niche business. It's a small business, but you guys have created, a positioning for yourselves that is, from my vantage point, incredibly powerful.
That's kind of you say. I mean, I think, we would definitely take pride in saying that we're the leading cycling-focused agency in the world. I think,
but there are limits to that.
There are limits to that, and it's been an interesting experience of late, because when you're linked so closely to an industry, and we're super proud to be part of the cycling industry, but when you're linked that closely to an industry, you roll with that industry. You ride the waves up and down, and so that's kind of definitely been something that we've experienced, like everyone who's worked in the cycling industry in the past sort of, I guess, 4 years, especially 5 years.
How has it gone, Wayne?
Well, like most people, I remember being in 2020, and I had to write our forecast down by 20%. Clients were asking us if they could, stop paying us because they had to shut down their factories. We had to respect that. And so, for a time there, the beginning of the COVID pandemic, for a time there, it was kind of bleak. And one particular client came to me and said, "Oh yeah, no, we're cutting our budgets." And I was like, even by this point, I was like, "But you're direct to consumer, and cycling is one of the things that you can do. I think this is going to be good." And yeah, sure enough, within 6-8 weeks, things started to turn around dramatically. We able to kind of nudge our forecast up as a business throughout that time, and then we kind of, like, by 2021, we'd gone from 20% down to level to kind of probably about 20-30% up in 2021. So things were going great, and then by 2022, I think we, like the rest of the industry, started
end of the
to think
summer.
About
end of the summer is when it tipped.
Yeah, I think I felt like we'd been cautious, and that we hadn't necessarily drunk the Kool-Aid, but at the same time, I think
Doesn't
the
matter.
scale of impact that we all experienced was pretty big. And so we've been riding that out as well, like the industry, because when you're that closely tied and your partners are going through it, you experience it in exactly the same ways.
So you guys experience, I presume, some tension, some
just some headwinds. I think we've had to change the size of the business. We had to change it up, and then you have to change it down, depending on kind of like the work that's there. And so we've definitely had that. I think we're kind of the right size right now, and I'm optimistic that there's some green shoots of recovery coming through.
There is. There is. Just yesterday, Shimano showed Q1 15% up. I jumped out of my chair when I saw that, because that's a huge positive sign. Yeah,
and UK sales were up in Q1 as well, 12%. US sales obviously were down in last year, but participation was up. And
let's not talk about the US.
Yeah. We've had a strong start. Working with some new clients and partners in Q1. However, there is talking of the US, there's obviously a lot of volatility still there.
And that's another topic. But I guess what I wanted to dive into was, I'm curious to understand, you being the CEO, is from the shareholder standpoint or from the ownership standpoint, is cycling enough? And then you just kind of focus on getting a mix of clients, because in cycling you can't generally, brands don't like it if if you've got 2 or 3 brands of the same category, they don't like that. So there's a ceiling to what Shift can, I'm presuming that there's a ceiling to what Shift can do in cycling. Is that something that you guys have come to terms with, or is that something that could possibly change? I guess, how do you view that?
Well, there's a couple of answers to that. I think that every year I used to think that, and actually, it's a big ecosystem, cycling. I think obviously we're probably best known for the expertise and the brands that we have in the enthusiast cycling space. But there's still huge potential and macroeconomic trends that are pushing cycling in the leisure space in terms of people want to be outside and spend their time in nature. Plus also, decarbonising transportation, and the EU recently signed a cycling declaration, promising billions of euros to help improve cycling in Europe, and so that's bringing lots of players in. Companies are still raising money to create new e-bike brands, and so that's definitely an area for growth. And then there's a kind of whole infrastructure piece around bike leasing or battery management. So it's a really big category if you think about it in those terms. And so we've been able to expand our offering to be to take cycling with a really wide-angled lens. But I think obviously we're probably best known for enthusiasts, but we spend not as much time, but almost as much time, working with commuter brands who are trying to kind of grow in that space. And also we work with competitions. We work
events.
Yeah, we do events. And so, there's always, and I think and then there's a kind of always new brands coming in. So I think that see cycling being a huge continuing part of our future, but I know that you picked up on before that we kind of rebranded, created a new identity, and we did add outdoor to our kind of, I guess, the summation of what we do, dedicated to cycling and the great outdoors. And I think that was just put very simply. Clients that we were working with in cycling had moved into the outdoor space and had come back to us to say, actually, we think that the skills and the expertise that you've had could really translate really well into certain categories within the outdoor space, because you really understand, people and their passions. You understand how to kind of find those people in specialist media environments, and the way in which you do it, using data and insight about those people rather than just using instinct, kind of feels like something that would work really well in a space that kind of is not dissimilar to cycling in many ways, because it's people's hobbies, their pastimes, the things that they're passionate about. So, cycling remains our focus, but at the same time, we believe that there's opportunities for us to work with brands who are more in the outdoor space,
and that's
to find some additional growth.
That is a natural progression. I think like moto is sometimes for certain people in our business, but it's positioning, man. That's what right? It's all about positioning. It's all about, what place in the mind of the customer do you occupy, right? And like I said, the way that you guys have positioned yourselves up until now has been incredibly precise and clean.
And we wrestled with that ourselves, but I think because it was almost brought about by clients saying, well, I've moved from this space to that space. We're laser focused on cycling in terms of like new products that we're developing. The majority of our business is in the cycling space, but if we can find like-minded clients, opportunities in the outdoor space where we think we can bring something to the party, we'll definitely kind of look at those and see whether we can add value.
Can we talk about the kind of main areas of service that you guys do, just to give people an idea of where does the Shift service offering land in terms of like what are the main categories?
I mean, I guess we're full service to an extent. There are obviously going to be some niches and some areas where we don't operate, but I would like to see, if you see it as a kind of almost like a linear process, like upfront, we have our own research platform, the Rider Research Hub, which is a unique research community. It's got like 13,000 cyclists on it globally, really focused on that hard to reach audience that you can't find during mainstream research panels. Like people who are super dedicated, that's spending thousands and thousands of dollars, pounds, euros on their bike, be that mountain bike or road. And so that it's been a big investment for us, but we've already run about 70 studies on that platform. We've got them to answer around 2 million questions. So that's kind of unique data points coming in. And that's kind of where we start. Like research, very much kind of, and data is at the core of our approach. And kind of off the back of that, we're able to develop our strategic offering and consultancy. So that I would say the upstream offering is the research, the data the strategy and the consulting. Then we've got, I guess, like global activation. So be that advertising, content and creation, be that PR and kind of, working with PR communications and activating that globally as well. And then we've got media planning and buying. So paid media as opposed to kind of that earned media space. Those are the three engines, I would say, the big engines of Shift. And then we also have content planning and kind of social media management and strategy, influencer and ambassador activation, and then we've got like sponsorship activation as well as being a kind of another service. And so that completes in a way the service offering from Shift, which is, I think is a pretty comprehensive offering. If we were not focused in one particular category, we couldn't offer all of those things. But because we've got that collective intelligence within the company and that, that deep understanding of the category, the connection to the networks and the channels and the specialist publishing environment, and also kind of we understand the audience, albeit there are differences between different disciplines and globally, but it's all one category at the end of the day. Then that enables us to be able to offer that comprehensive suite of services, which I think is, I guess, coming back to your earlier point, if we were to say what kind of, in terms of the scale and the size of Shift, like that is probably unique. There aren't, from our other agencies who we often collaborate with directly, they don't tend to be able to offer that full range of services in quite the same way.
Well, and I guess that comes to my question is then having that type of an offering. So I guess coming back, research is the primary focus because that gives you guys.
It's not the primary focus. Sorry, it's just more that kind of where we start.
Right, right. But it gives you insight into how to speak with these people.
I think the industry has been probably up to, certainly when I joined, characterized by having super passionate people, often ex-pros who are working in the space, who go on intuition, and I think
intuition, yep,
yeah,
perfect.
And so they got gut instinct for it. They are a rider. They understand riders, and I think that there's a huge amount to be said for that. That's kind of like critical that you've got that connection. What we use is research to keep us honest, because actually, what I found myself is like you start thinking that a mid-range group set is Ultegra. Where for most most riders who are pretty keen, well, they want to spend $1,000 or £1,000 on a bike. So like a mid-range group spec that is 1,500 is not mid-range. It's it's premium. So 105 is premium. Then you've got like super premium. You've got ultra premium. And so what we kind of do is say, let's unpick this. Let's really properly understand their motivations. Let's understand and profile those audiences. And then we can really advise you how to pull your brand apart from other brands and give you an unfair advantage to make sure that you get an unfair share of the market. And we do that by using kind of data and insight that because we've invested in the Rider Research Hub, which is unique, like that gives us the ability to give that unique perspective to our clients. And so it's where we start. It's not the primary focus, but it's where we start.
No, I guess I've had this conversation with a lot of brands, and positioning is so key in everything that is done, especially in cycling, because I guess I wanted to talk briefly about positioning because having someone that is so experienced like yourself, can you just talk about, and I know this is like for you it's probably really obvious, but for not for everyone, how important to be well positioned is for a brand in cycling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think brand. There's some amazing iconic brands that really stand out, but at the same time, if you take a category like wheels, there are 7, 8, probably even 15 amazing makers of high-end black carbon wheels. Like no one is making a bad one. And so, like with that level of quality, and the fact that a consumer theoretically could pick any one of those top 10 and have amazing riding experience, it's going to come down to how you tell the brand story, how you position it, that is going to be distinctive and disruptive, that is going to draw more attention to your brand than it is to, you know, a perfectly brilliantly engineered equivalent product that is next door, kind of, you know, on the shopping, well, in the shop, or kind of in the Google shopping ads at the top of the top of your search engine. So, like, for us, it's like, how do we find a way to understand the audience that is going to best connect with the story that you've got, and position your brand in such a way, and then make sure we put the product in front of those people more often than not.
And that's the same for every category, e-bikes.
Yeah, I just take wheels because I think wheels, they are often, like, from a distance so similar. They're all really high quality, and so, but you know, it's the same. There's a lot of competition within the cycling market, and so,
oh my god, and more every day, because products are so readily available. From factories and
there's capacity in the factories. So if you've got a good idea for a brand, it's quite easy to go and make one. And so the way in which you're going to make a difference is to have an interesting story, position it well, use disruptive communications to make it stand out, understand the codes and conventions of the category as well. You can't be disruptive for a disruptive sake, but find a way to tell a kind of differentiated and distinct story. So that you can draw more attention to your brand and hopefully, you know, get an unfair share of the market as a result.
So it sounds like the work that you guys are doing is incredibly important, even more today than ever before, because of this maybe saturation of products.
I mean, I've not really thought about it in that way. So I think it's always been important. It might be more challenging now, because not only is there a kind of, you know, maybe there's more products, but there's sometimes in some aspects the barriers to entry are lower. There's more communications touch points. You know, in the past, when I started my career, if you could afford to put an advert on television, you know,
you were the only one.
You were going to reach 80% of population. You know, that is not the case. You know, now you have to kind of be really sophisticated, and that's where our media team comes in to play. It's like, okay, we've got a finite budget. How do we make sure that we get this product and message in front of the right people at the right time?
And so, being having such deep experience, I presume that you guys, in certain cases, will use certain areas of your expertise depending on the need of the brand, because
yeah, we try to be agnostic about what the solution is. You know, I think, you know, we try to think about what's the best way to solve this business problem, what's the best way to connect with this consumer, and then create a plan or a strategy or a go-to-market approach off the back of that. I think what we also, though, do is often, you know, we're just working in one of our services. A client might just require us to help them with their PR because they've got a really brilliant team internally that is creating the content. They want to manage some of the relationships with the media themselves, but they do want us to kind of help them kind of activate that, you know, in multiple markets, in multiple languages. And so that's when we might get brought to the fair. In other clients, we provide everything. And, you know, that's actually kind of few and far between do we use everything, but we work with Continental, and, you know, we're fortunate enough to have just launched a couple of products with them, and so there we're able to do research, we're able to do strategy, we're able to do creative content, PR, social media management, and then kind of manage the execution of that and work with their ambassadors to activate it. So, you know, that's a kind of, I guess, the fully connected example of what we do, but sometimes there's others where
there's
we're
also
just tactically
budget constraints as well, because there are small, you know, a lot of smaller companies in
and we're fortunate enough to work with big household names that are in cycling, but they're also in other things, Continental being a good example of that.
Right.
Or we're working with kind of, you know, smaller single market brands, and we're just tailoring our solution accordingly. So I think, yeah, coming back to your original point, you know, we can work in lots of different ways with lots of different clients and at lots of different scales. I think mostly what we're looking for is somebody who's a kind of going to be a really great partner, is going to be open to our advice and our recommendations, and that we feel feels as passionately about the categories we do.
Can you provide some insight into what you're seeing in terms of macro trends in media right now? I know that TikTok and short form video, I see it in my house and with my kids and everything like that. Video has really become very compressed in terms of the amount of time that people will spend watching content. Instagram kind of blew up, and now it's sort of shifted to Reels. And I guess, what are you seeing just from a macro standpoint, Wayne, where things are going in terms of media, since you guys are?
Yeah, I guess, well, there's two sort of sides to that. Like, on a macro level, thinking about all audiences, then yeah, there's kind of like those big changes and the impact of TikTok and the impact of shorter form content and just doom scrolling and just kind of absorbing it in that sort of way. And I guess, the changes that you've seen within the broadcast environment and the challenges that the publishers are under in terms of holding on to their audiences and their business models, and the way in which kind of like paywalls and all those things are evolving. All of that is kind of happening in the space, but we obviously then have to zero in on, okay, what are riders doing and what is that demographic doing, without sort of losing attention on kind of what the new entrants and new recruits might be doing. But that kind of sweet spot, certainly when we're talking about enthusiast riders, is still probably operating in 5 or 6 channels are their go-to. If they're searching or they're researching a product, they're going to Google to do that. They're going to the company's website. They're then bouncing over to a few reviews that, still SEO plays such a massive part in terms of the publishers. If you're looking for buy a new group set and you want to see a review, you're still going to end up on a publisher website, because Google's just going to take you there. Currently, I mean, AI could have an impact on that.
That's how people, like, just kind of diving into this. People, when they look for products, they're looking for reviews. They're looking for third-party validation, if that's what you want to call it.
And I think that I guess they still have a big role there. There's obviously consolidation that's taken place in the specialist publisher market, but they still have a big role to play. And I think that we certainly try to help the whole ecosystem, because we know that consumers are going to go look in those sites, and so
that's where they're going to be part. That's where they're going to get informed.
Yeah. But at the same time, I guess you've got like independent creators and YouTubers who are kind of also filling some gaps there as well. And obviously GCN is kind of hugely successful and enjoys vast audience reach. But there are also those other kind of independents that are also developing, that kind of have their own niches, their own communities, their own followings. And so, when we're putting together media plans, we're thinking about, okay, how do we work with Google and Meta? How do we work with the publishers, the specialists, the endemic media? And, and then how are we going to work with creators and influencers to ensure that we surround our target consumer or target rider with our message, and saying, do it efficiently, get the right frequency, optimize the opportunities to see, but do that in a way that kind of that makes the most of any sort of brand's budget.
So when it comes down to it, you're sitting down with them, you're trying to come up with, obviously, this positioning we talked about before, so that the brands can emerge in an effective way. And that's more of the strategic kind of positioning work that you guys do. And then you come together with them and you say, okay, here are the channels that are ideal based on our research. Let's go out and let's attack each of these channels based on the needs or the goals of the brand, I presume.
That's describing it incredibly accurately. Yeah, that's how we kind of tend to do our best work, is when we go, okay, we've looked at the data, we've looked at the insight, not only our unique research, but we've looked at other kind of first and third party sources. We often use Google, And then we kind of to kind of understand trends and look at kind of intent and behavior. We combine that with kind of like the collective intelligence. We call it the hive mind that exists within Shift as well, because we've been there and done that often in a number of cases. And then that helps us kind of develop our strategies. And then off the back of that, we put together kind of plans and activation approaches that are going to kind of, maximize the investment for a client. And also kind of, meet the objectives as well.
And how do you think about the PR of Shift? Like, what is that? How is that? Is that something that just kind of happens organically, or is that something that you're deliberate about?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's I think at the beginning of the formation of the company, I think we definitely didn't want to put ourselves out there ahead of our clients. It was our job to make our clients famous, not ourselves necessarily. I think in the pandemic, we had to kind of switch that up a little bit because we were not able to go and see people as easily as we had been previously. And, we spend a lot of time at shows, we spend a lot of time in the industry, spend a lot of time at events and at races. And when you can't do all of those things, like we had to find other ways to kind of promote ourselves. So Rachel Burnside, who is our sort of marketing and growth, not sort of, she is, our marketing and growth, head of marketing and growth here at Shift. We work closely together to devise a marketing plan, to communicate with potential clients and also kind of potential employees and people who might want to come and work here. And so then we're very deliberate and considered in the same way. We have to take our own medicine, I would say.
Right. Yeah,
so we think about the audience, we think about what touch points there are, we think about what messages that we think we need to land, and we're very sort of considered and deliberate about how we then go and set about that.
So there's a whole separate time that you sit down with you said her name's Rachel.
Rachel.
You say
sorry.
And we have to be visible. We have to so there's not only are you helping your clients be visible, but you guys also have an internal kind of work group that is doing that as well. And what are some of the most effective ways that you guys are being more visible to the market?
I think we tend to focus on a kind of heartbeat of communication that comes off of the back of social websites, blog posts or latest pages. LinkedIn is obviously a big platform for us as well.
It's a lot of it is featuring the work that you're doing is probably
promoting work that we're doing, and I think it comes back to something you said earlier. Also, we want to deliver insights back to our partners and prospective partners as well, and so that's why we produce something like What's Next, which is our annual report.
That's a great
that gives insight into kind of our take on what we've seen in the previous year, some unique research from the Rider Research Hub on what riders are saying they're going to do, and then kind of what we're seeing in search that might indicate future patterns of behavior or growth in every particular category within cycling. And so that is a kind of great opportunity for us to give back to the industry that we're so proud to be a part of, and also kind of get our brand out there and it builds and build a kind of perception of what it is that Shift actually does.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worked. I'm telling you, man, it's whatever you're doing, it's working.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, cool, man. This was fun, Wayne. I appreciate the candor and really giving us, the inside look, because brands, they a lot of people in the industry listen to this podcast, and I'm really glad that we're able to give people, an inside look at what you do and what Shift does, because I think it's important for people to understand who the leaders in this space and how they think. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yeah. And if people want to get in touch with you, Wayne, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, obviously they can find Shift at shiftactivemedia.com. And if they want to get in touch with me, I'm wayne.brown at shiftactivemedia.com as well. Or you can find me on LinkedIn or via our other social media channels.
Great, man. Thank you so much, Wayne.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.